The only thing I ask is that you get it up on YouTube so other people can see it as well. Okay? I don't care about the accolade. You don't have to tag it with my name if you don't want to or anything like that. It'd be nice if you did, but you don't have to. Okay? The main thing is we're out of time. So we need to get this word out to as many people as possible. And people are not going to listen to fanatics. The second we start talking like a fanatic, they immediately picture us running around in mop suits like the people on Doomsday Preppers, right? And they tune us out. So what we've got to do is stop being fanatics. It's a very simple, easy way to do that. Several years ago, I was involved in a conversation with a person. And prior to that conversation, my wife's attitude toward me talking about prepping was just like her attitude today when I talk about pine trees. Okay? She didn't want to hear it because I was a fanatic. Okay? I started with my preps. Really, it started in 1992. We went to 1990. Desert Storm was what, 1991? Yeah, so August of 92. I went to Panama Republica to do some jungle training, okay? And what we were supposed to do is we were supposed to land and have a day to get our cots set up and unpack our sea bags, relaxing day, right? And then the next day we were supposed to begin 2 days of in-dock training where they were going to show us all the things like you don't sit on this log because it'll move and wrap itself around you and then swallow you whole because it's a giant snake, okay? And you stay away from this spider because when it bites you, 8 minutes later you're dead and there's no cure. And you stay away from this and that, and you make sure you cover up with your mosquito netting at night so the vampire bats don't bite you, and then you gotta stay there for like however many days getting all the shots in your stomach for rabies, and all that kind of fun stuff. And then we were supposed to have 2 days of off-base liberty where we get to tour the nice little town of Panama City, you know, and just enjoy all of that. And then we were supposed to go out in the jungle for a couple of days and then come back, and then go out in the jungle for a couple of days and then come back. So needless to say, when I went to Panama, my sea bag had 2 12-packs of Pepsi in it, okay, because I'm a big Pepsi guy. And Coke is okay, but I'm a Pepsi drinker, right? Coke lost the taste test challenge with me. Anyway, and you know, a couple cartons of cigarettes and some Spam and some Beanie Weenies and some Vienna sausages and all that kind of fun stuff, okay? And in reality, what happened is we land and we go into this giant tent that keeps inflated by the air conditioner running, right? And it's a pretty cool little tent. And we go in, there's all these cots everywhere, and we drop our sea bags, and 20 minutes later, we get called into a meeting, and all the NCOs and everything. And about 2 hours later, we're on these helos flying out into the jungle. And they're supposed to drop us on one side of the mountain where the grass is only about this tall, and instead the pilots being Air Force. And if you're in the Air Force, or if you were in the Air Force, I appreciate your service, but you weren't in the Force. So anyhow, I'm just kidding. Look, Marine Corps and Army did a 10% discount with us. Navy, we don't charge an upcharge. Air Force pays a 25% premium. It's payback for all the times y'all had Hot Wheels and air conditioning and I didn't. But anyway, instead the pilot drops us on the underside, so when we step out the back of the helo, we're supposed to be 8 feet off of the grass, where the grass was 12 foot tall, monkey grass. And that began a process for us that had me in the jungle for 27 days. Now, fortunately, I had enough time to grab a couple cans of Pepsi and a couple cans of Vienna sausages and a carton of cigarettes to throw in my Alice pack before we got on the helo. But I was woefully unprepared for that. And the first thing I did when I came home is I went to the Army-Navy surplus store. Of course, this is early 90s. I'm in the Corps, right? So we got our standard gear. You got your Alice pack frame, your, I almost messed up your little rubber mat, right? And your deuce gear, H harness, canteen cup holders, all that kind of fun stuff, fanny pack, right? So I bought an extra set of deuce gear. And I filled it full of MREs, and I filled the water canteens with water, and I threw some water tabs in my pack, you know, and some extra socks and some knives and stuff. Threw it in the trunk of my car. My wife says to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Hey, I'll never be hungry again, right? And I'll never be without water again." And she goes, "This is the United States of America. This isn't Panama." And I went, "I will never be hungry again." And unbeknownst to me, that was the moment that I became a prepper. Okay. Now, ironically enough, in 2011, we had a house fire, lost everything. And in our closet, we had our Y2K survival box. And, we'd forgotten about it, right? And so as we're cleaning everything up from the fire and going through an inventory and everything from the insurance company. Side note, if you've never had a fire, do yourself a favor. When you get home tonight, go through your house with a video camera and video everything. And then put that someplace outside, away from your home, so that if your house burns down, you remember what all you had. Because the insurance company doesn't just come in and write you a check. You have to give them an inventory. And you have to tell them when you bought it, how much you paid for it, and if you were to sell it on eBay, how much you would sell it for, and blah, blah, blah. Then they take all this money and all this information and they discount it all drastically, and you don't get near what it costs to replace it. But if you got that, you can remember everything. Anyhow, so we're digging through this box, and I'm looking at it going, really? This is what we had prepped and set aside to survive the end of the world in Y2K. And I'm so thankful that since then my wife has got on board with things, because here's what happened. I was a fanatic, plain and simple, okay? And one day a buddy of mine and I were sitting around having a cup of coffee, and he starts telling me all about Nibiru, Nibiru, Planet X, the Red Wing Destroyer, the planet that's going to kill us all, right? And that started me researching it, because he made such a sound argument. I mean, it just made sense, right? Historically, archaeologically, it lined up with the Bible. I mean, it's all this stuff, right? Oh, yeah, and he's throwing out some factual data. Well, yeah. So I became a fanatic about Nibiru. And in my research of Nibiru, I found some things that led me to some things, that brought me across this report by the United Nations that made me sit back and go, oh my God, everybody's wrong. So I've dedicated my life since then to spreading that information. Okay? But at that moment, I was still a fanatic. And I tell everybody. It's like when you first become a Christian. Do you know Jesus? Have you found Jesus? A friend of mine one time, I asked, have you found Jesus? In the kitchen, having a cup of coffee. But I was a fanatic about prepping, just like I had been when I first became a Christian. And let me tell you, it turned a lot of people off. They don't want to hear it. Nobody wants to hear it. Who here watches The Newsroom on HBO? Oh my God, great show. Great show. Third season only had 7 episodes or 6 or something like that. Now it's over, series finale. But in the second episode or third episode of this, I'm pretty sure the second episode of this latest season, they have a guy on there from the EPA. And he's talking about the carbon emissions and how it's affected, and where so many parts per million, yada, 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 and so many gigatons of this, and all that kind of fun stuff, right? But he makes a statement on the show that floors everybody on the cast of the news program when he says, a person has already been born that will die from catastrophic failure of our planet. Okay? Now I'm watching the show and I went, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. I like this episode. This equates to what I understand. So I started doing some research on that. And here's the thing about The Newsroom that very few people that watch the show actually understand. It's a fictional show that is predicated off of factual events. It's a fictional show that takes every episode is based off of something that CNN or MSNBC or Fox News or RT or any of the other ones ran during the year that season was for. Like this year was for 2013 and yada, yada, yada. Okay? And while the main character is supposed to be a conservative, there's an extreme liberal slant to the show, right? Which kind of gets old after a while. But anyway, I started doing some research on it, and lo and behold, in 2013, there was a representative from the federal EPA that sat on CNN and made a statement very similar to that. Now, granted, CNN is liberal, and the liberals have an agenda. We have to get away from fossil fuels. It's destroying the planet. The increase in the CO2 in our atmosphere is caused by carbon emissions at 0.009%. We're increasing carbon in our atmosphere because it's cyclic. We're moving into a mini ice age because it's cyclic. We're about to change directions through the solar system because it's cyclic. We're about to be bombarded with massive amounts of near-Earth objects because it's cyclic. It's part of the 432-year cycle, 3647-year cycle, and the 5464-year cycle, which we're going to be getting into at a later class. But I bring that up because of this. At a point in my research, while I was a photographer, and my wife wouldn't listen to anything I had to say about prepping, okay? I came across some stuff that startled me to the core. And because I had credible sources, I mean, come on, who's more credible than the United States Council on Space and Scientific Affairs? Right? Who's more credible than NASA when we start talking about changes in our atmosphere and directional of planets and the pole shifting on planets, which, by the way, side note, the Earth is the only planet in our solar system that cannot have a physical pole shift. It's physically impossible. So those of you that are prepping, waiting for the day when the poles swap, it's never going to happen. It's not going to happen. Don't worry about it. Okay? Every other planet in our solar system can and has recently had a physical pole shift. My favorite was Jupiter's. The red eye on Jupiter disappeared, and 48 seconds later it reappeared 37.6 degrees away. And NASA has a video on their website about it, which is super awesome. Okay? The pole shifts we caught on video for Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, and Uranus. The videos are on their website if you want to watch them. Super cool. Every planet in our solar system had a physical pole shift during a 3.5-month window. During that time, our magnetic poles completed their 37.6 degree journey. By the way, every planet that had a pole shift, it shifted by 37.6 degrees. Since October of 2012, if you've paid attention to our weather patterns, you will see that all of our historical weather patterns going back for as long as it's on record, which is, by the way, 1828, you see that all of our weather patterns have shifted 37.6 degrees. Everybody's concerned about these massive amounts of animal die-offs. The reason why the animals are dying is because during their migratory patterns, they're going to where things are supposed to be that are no longer there because they've shifted 37.6 degrees. That's why we've got dolphins showing up on coasts where they've never seen dolphins in 150 years. Now there's 800 of them lying dead on a beach. Their internal tracking is off. You follow? That's why birds are falling out of the sky. They're going to areas they've never been before. They're being introduced to new climates and new things in the atmosphere that they're not used to having, and they're hitting this big wall of stuff that they shouldn't be hitting because it's never been where their minds have told them to go before. And they're dying. 37.6 degrees. We're going to come back to that later. I point all that out because there was a moment where I was in a conversation with a person, and he says to me, "Well, Bob, you're one of those crazy preppers. What are you prepping for? What is it you fear so much that you got to waste all your money on all this stuff that you're never going to use?" Well, I'm not afraid of anything because I'm ready for everything. Because I spent all my money on all that crazy stuff you think I'm never going to use. But, you know, when the ice storm hit us 2 years ago, who was it that brought you a generator and gasoline? And 2 days later, more gasoline. And food and water for your family. Because you love that new TV you bought a lot more than you love your family. Instead of asking me why I'm one of those crazy preppers, you need to ask your wife why she's dumb enough to stay married to a person that loves his stuff more than her. Who would rather play golf than to accept his responsibility to take care of his family under any circumstance. What do I fear? Living next door to an idiot like you. That's it. And I turned and looked at my wife, and she had that look. Guys, you know that look. I'm in trouble. She says, "I'm ready to go." And I looked at my wife. My response to your question is this: what does it hurt? How does it hurt me to have have 6 months worth of groceries. How does it hurt me to have 6 months worth of toothpaste? I could get in an accident tomorrow. I could get hurt at work tomorrow. I could lose my job tomorrow. So that if I was you, and I'm talking to this gentleman, I said, if I'm you and you live week to week, then you get your paycheck on Friday, and your wife pays whatever bills you do, and then Saturday morning you get up and you go to the grocery store, and you buy what you can afford to get you through the next week. And then you leave the grocery store and you go to the gas station, you fill your car with gas so you can get back and forth to work next week. And you buy your carton of cigarettes that you need for next week. And you take what you can and you put it in your savings account so you can buy that big TV or you can buy that new boat that you're only going to use twice a year, right? And if you've got some left, you take your wife to dinner and a movie afterwards. And then come Monday, you're starting all over again. So if I lived like you, I would be deathly afraid of losing my job. I would be terrified of losing my job because I have an obligation to my family. So instead of you asking me what it is that I'm afraid of, why don't you ask yourself why you love your stuff more than your family? Why you're shirking your responsibilities you need? What does it hurt to, instead of buying that boat, buy a couple months worth of food for your family? What does it hurt? I looked at my wife and she still had that look. So we left. We're driving home. It's a 48-minute drive home in the dark. And she's looking at the passenger window the whole time. Not a word is spoken. You know what I'm talking about. I pulled up in the driveway and I just knew it's going to be a bad 3 days. But that's how long it will take. At some point in time in that 3-day period, I would crack a joke that she would actually laugh at. Or I would do something nice for her, right? Because that's what guys do when they're in trouble. Instead of just doing it on a regular basis like we should. Anyway. Then I knew I was in trouble. When I turned off the ignition, I opened the door, the light came on, and she turned and looked at me, and she had been crying. And that woman doesn't cry. Okay? I got a knot on the back of my head from a can of Coke from 1994 when I made the mistake of calling her the B word. I don't even say that word anymore, let alone direct it to her. Okay? In her father's front yard. And when I looked up, her father was laughing at me. So, anyway, she said, I never knew. All of the time you've been prepping, and I've been fighting with you about it, arguing about it, I never knew that you were doing it because you loved us. She said, you loved us so much that you kept doing it even though I was arguing with you about it. She says, I'm in. And she became a prepper that day. It wasn't when I was all emotional and on fire about the things that we could improve that scared the crap out of me that I was able to convince her to become a prepper. It was when I calmed down, and I took a deep breath, and I looked at the guy and I said, what does it hurt? I prep because I love my family, and I've got a responsibility to them. She became a prepper that day. I say that because of this. We as preppers have a lot of misguided conceptions, okay? To give an example, you're a prepper. I'm not. I know you have stuff. My response to you when you try to convince me to be a prepper is, what do I need to do it for? I'm coming to your house. What's your response? I gotta go. Standard response from preppers. You know what my response is? Good. I'm glad you know where I'm at. Because you don't love your family enough to handle your responsibilities. I've been prepping specifically for you. All I ask is that when you come out, you bring everything you can carry. All of your guns, your food, any ammo you've got. Hey, fill up any jugs of water. Whatever you can possibly bring to help you once you get here, bring it. In the meantime, I've been taking care of things for you. Because I love your family more than you do. Now, since that's your plan to come to my house, let's take some steps toward that. At some point in time over the next week, if you think about it, collect a couple pairs of socks, underwear, t-shirts, extra pants, maybe a jacket or two for each member of your family. Throw them into trash bags and bring them out. I got a place I can store them in my basement. That way, when you do get here, because you got nowhere else to go, you've at least got a clean change of clothes to put on. Now, I used to say to them, oh, yeah, show up at my house. I see you coming. I'm gonna pop you. And that cost me to lose friends, right? Who wants to be friends with somebody who just told them you come to my house after something crazy? I want to shoot you. They don't want to be my friend now. And I've turned them off to the idea of becoming a prepper. Why? Because they leave that conversation thinking, this guy's crazy. My way, they leave the conversation, still my friend, because I've told them, yeah, sure, look, you want to take care of your family, bring them. I got your back. I'm man enough for both of us. I'll handle it. And they leave that conversation thinking, he's crazy, but at least I got a place to go. And at some point in time, they're going to get home, and they're going to be talking with their wife, and going, you know what that crazy Bob said to me? He said when something goes crazy, something happens, we can go to his place. They'll probably have this conversation while they're watching the news, with civil unrest, with the earthquakes, or the tornadoes, or the wildfires, or the hurricanes. And they'll say, crazy Bob said we can come to his place. In fact, he even said we could bring some clothes out there and store them in his basement. What do you think about that? And there's not a mother around hearing that that's not going to go, at least somebody's willing to take care of my kids. Yeah, let's throw some clothes together, take them over crazy Bob. What's the hurry? Now all of a sudden, what have we done? We've got them preparing. We don't be fanatics about it. Because the simple fact of the matter is, guys, you're not going to turn them away. I hate my sister. Are you watching? I do. I hate that woman with a passion. But she's a hard worker. And when something needs to be done, she will jump in and do it. And if she shows up at my house, I'm not going to turn her. My brother, there's not a human being alive today that is more worthless. But he has a wife, and he has children. And let's face it, if I turn him away, he'll sell me out for a loaf of bread at the nearest FEMA family relocation. We're not going to turn him away, guys. That neighbor down the street that laughs at you for being a prepper while he's out polishing that boat that he never uses, right? You're not going to turn him away. Let me tell you why you're not going to turn him away. Because on day 17, after society eating event, when you look out your window and you see little Johnny burying little 6-year-old Susie, his sister, in the front yard, because that's where she liked to play. And you go and you ask him, Johnny, where are your mom and dad? I buried them yesterday. At that moment, whether it's their fault or not that they didn't get prepared is irrelevant. Mentally and emotionally, you're going to accept the deaths of those people on your shoulders. And it may be okay when you see grown men and grown women die. Not when you see that little 6-year-old girl that you used to pass every morning in your car when she was walking to school holding her mama's hand. It's going to hit home. That's what you're going to deal with, guys. If you were fortunate enough to still be alive at that point. We have to stop thinking about what we need and our family needs. My wife and I wrote an article together for a magazine called Prep to Prepared Magazine. We ended up doing a 3-part series on it about getting prepared through the eyes of a child. Because why do we prepare, right? We prepare so that our kids survive. So that someday we can have grandkids, and then they can have grandkids. And their grandkids can sit in a school named after us and read about us in the history books. We're coming to that part, by the way. So if we're preparing for our children's survival, why aren't we taking our kids' mental and emotional state in the aftermath of a society-ending event into play into our preps? I love it when I sit down with a couple and we start talking about family preparedness. Because I get the same responses every single time. The man, he's got the best get-home bag and the newest knife and the latest water filter and all the coolest food, all the gadgets. Let me tell you something. I can take a bag of trash out of your house and my knife and I can survive indefinitely. We're going to teach y'all how to do that later today because it's very important. Not because there might come a day where you're living off of somebody else's bag of trash, but because it gets you thinking so far outside the box that the box no longer exists. More importantly, it gets you working today on your survival tomorrow. Because if you wait to start working on your survival until you need to be surviving, yeah, you're going to die. And my goal is to make sure that as many of y'all survive as possible. Why? I might be in Harrisburg, PA when the Schumer hits the fan. And I'm diddy bopping down the street, and Don over here goes, "Hey, is that Bob? Dude, come inside, get out of the elements, make you a hot meal." You see what I'm saying? For purely selfish reasons. Maybe someday one of y'all will see me and I need you to hook me up with a hot meal. I'm completely unselfish and spread as much information as I can with you. Or maybe you share my book with somebody else and they share it with somebody else and that person doesn't read it, but it's sitting on their coffee table and I'm walking by in society in an event and they go, "Hey, that's this dude. Come in and tell me how to survive." You never know. You never know what tomorrow brings. And you never know who you're going to come in contact with tomorrow. So for purely selfish reasons, you have to be completely unselfish. So when you're looking at things like my neighbors, right, my friends, my coworkers, you can keep being a fanatic if that's what you want to do. Do whatever you want. Other people know you're a prepper, and after you die, they'll have a nice little cachet of supplies. Because you're not going to get there on your own. I woke up this morning, and I sat there, snooze. I looked at the ceiling. I got up out of bed, and I put on my pants and my shirt, and I went down to the front lobby at the Hampton Inn, and I fixed 3 cups of coffee and 1 cup of orange juice, because that's my morning routine in the Hampton. 2 cups of coffee for me, 1 cup of coffee and a glass of orange juice for my wife. I brought them back to the room, and I sat there on the bed, and I opened up my iPad, started checking all the stuff I got to check every morning, and I'm drinking my coffee. And sometime between where I finished fixing my first cup of coffee, because, I drank one while I was fixing the other one down the lobby. Between there and the time I finished my first cup of coffee, I got to the point in my morning where I was fully awake and aware of my surroundings. Up until that point in time, I'm up, I'm functioning, but I wasn't awake. And I love it when I talk to people and they tell me, "Oh, I'm trying to spread the word. We got to get as many people awake as possible. We got to tell them all about the Illuminati and the FEMA camps." I look at them, I go, "Dude, hit the snooze button and let me know when you've had your first cup of coffee." Because you're not awake. And you're not aware. So I love it when I'm talking with couples, and the guy, he's got the big get-home bag, he's got all the latest, greatest tools, and this sleeping bag that compresses down, and it's this big, but it folds out, and it'll keep him warm in negative 85-degree temperature. He can live on the moon with that. And I look at the woman, tell me what's your role in your relationship and your preps? Well, we've got enough food set aside to get the family through a year, and we've got enough toilet paper. It takes 46 rolls of toilet paper per man per year and 58 rolls of toilet paper per woman per year. These are statistics. So we've made sure that we've got a year's worth of toilet paper. And, little Johnny, he likes the close-up, and little Susie, she likes the Pepsodent, and I like Crest. So we've got enough toothpaste to get us through a year, and everybody's got their own shampoos, and we've got our medical supplies, right? I mean, our medical closet would put most downtown emergency rooms to shame with everything that we've got, and we could perform surgery in our barn. Hang some plastic up. I love that episode of Doomsday Preppers, by the way. That guy. That was the guy. That was the guy that I can point at and go, "Dude, you're him. Don't be that guy." Anyway, I love that guy. And I'm glad he's in prison. So, he is. The guy was a multiple convicted felon for sexual assault. You can't be around guns if you're a convicted felon. And you can't be on national television shooting guns. That's the high point of stupidity. Anyway. I tell people all the time, prisons are full of stupid people. If I committed a crime, I'd be living in the woods somewhere. They'll give up looking after a while. Anyway, I digress. So the women, they tell me all this wonderful stuff that they have, right? And then we begin the process of the questions. I have the same question I ask everyone. And if you've listened to some of my teachings before, you've heard this part of it, but we're going to go over it again because it's important. So I asked the question, okay, let's throw out a scenario for you. Let's throw out a scenario for you. You step off the trail. It's you, your wife, and little Johnny, right? And you cook a meal. And the smoke and the flames and the smell of the food cooking. We're going to talk later about reducing your noise signature, reducing your visual signature, and more importantly, reducing your scent signature. We're going to talk about that later. But anyway, as you get all cleaned up, everybody's eating, you're heading back to the trail, and you're approached by a couple, man, woman, and child. And he says, dude, I know you got food. We watched you eating the last of it. Can you spare some? My wife hasn't eaten in 3 days, and my son hasn't eaten in 2 days, and I haven't eaten in 4 days. Right then, I know this is a good man. Because when his rations run out, he recognizes, if I eat today, my wife and son won't eat tomorrow. Right? So anyway, what do you do? What do you do when this man approaches you? What do you do?
Give him a little something.
Okay, you no longer have any food for you to eat. Here's the scenario. You have one package of food left that's enough food to feed your child and your spouse tomorrow. And this guy, wearing his $400 alligator shoes, and his wife, who for some reason is still walking in her high heels, with a little ring on every finger, and 3 days after a society event has still managed to have perfect makeup, right? And he explains to you that all he had in his Jaguar was 2 water bottles, and you lost one of them. Do you have any food you can spare for him and his child and his wife? And you have one meal left for your child and your spouse. Now what do you do? Think about it. What do you do? You'd give it to him. Sir in the back, what would you do?
Well, the philosophy guy is the teacher of future.
There you go. So in your case, a bullet is not cheaper than a meal. What do you do? What do you do? There we go. So you tell him no, and he starts begging. Please. You tell him no again. You can tell by his facial expression, which we're going to do a class on here in a little bit. Tell by his facial expression, his body language, he's starting to get agitated and desperate. And he asks you one more time. You say no. So he pulls his knife and he approaches you. What do you do? So the general consensus is we would shoot him, right? Everybody that would shoot him, raise your hand at this point. He's coming at you with a knife. So here's the thing, guys. If you allow a situation to escalate into violence, somebody is going to lose. You follow me? Somebody is going to lose. If you shoot him, chances are you're going to kill him. So my question is, what do you do next? What do you do? You killed the guy. His wife is laying across his body prostrate, crying. An 8-year-old son is looking at you screaming, why did you kill my dad? You turn to your wife, and she's got this look on her face like, what just happened? What do you do next? You got a bear? What do you do next? What do you do?
priorities, I guess.
We do, Don.
I'm gonna have to beat them anyway.
Jack, this is 19 days after society and event. Your whole family's dead. What do you do?
Say that again.
It's 19 days after society and event. You've already lost your whole family. What do you do in that situation?
Get out where I was.
Get out of where I was just at. So, when I talk to families and couples about that, I love it because I always get the same response and the exact same answers. The man approaches you. You've got enough food for your wife and your son for one more day. What do you do? Ah, by God, I don't give them any. And then they look to their wife. And the wife, They'll go through the next thing and next thing. And finally, well, I'd shoot them. They look to their wife. And their wife, And then the next question, then what? Nobody ever thinks about it. You ever shot a man? Anyone? You ever killed a man? You're not going to bury him. I was 19 years old. My father had spent over 40 months in country Vietnam during the course of 5 years of his Army career. Combat vet. He was MIA for 3.5 months. When 11 of the 14 people in his patrol died, my mother was informed that he was KIA. They'd given up hope of finding him. He comes stepping out of the jungle one day with his little Montagnard Scout and the only other survivor from his platoon, his squad. Stepped out of the jungle one day, walked into a forward base camp and asked for some more heat tabs and ammo. It's like, Charlie Mike, continue the mission. That's a hardcore vet right there. That's a man who has seen the monkey and lived to tell about it. Okay? I was getting ready to go to Desert Storm and understand at the time, yes, Desert Storm was a 5-day war, I get it. I fired my weapon about 3 minutes after they told us that, war was over, just so I could say I pulled the trigger during my war. I was a Marine. 6 months of training, boot camp, Marine Combat Training, School of Infantry. The whole thing is about, you gotta see the red mist. Kill, kill, kill! Right, that's what they teach us, okay? And so I pulled the trigger. It was fun. The point I'm making, though, is when we were getting ready to go to Desert Storm, this is what we were told. Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And on the very first day of combat, we were going to lose over 80% KIA and another 12% WIA. And the United States Marine Corps Infantry Forces in theater would be down to 8% combat effective by the end of the first day of combat. That's what we were told going into it. My wife was 8 days late the day I left of giving birth to our youngest daughter. That poor woman was facing some serious uncertainty. My father, this hardcore vet, he sits me down and he says to me, he says, son, we're going to talk about some things that I've not talked about with anybody. He says, I'm going to tell you some things that every person that I told this their first day in country survived. And those that I didn't, died. And I want you to survive what you're about to go through. He says, the first thing is this. Your friends die in living color. And for a time, you will remember their death. And after a while, you will remember their lives. So the second thing is, you're not going over there to fight for country or mom or apple pie or baseball because, the morning after they show the news of your funeral, the country will have forgotten you. The people that will remember you are the brothers next to you that were there the day you died, and your friends and family alone. He says, so you're not going over there to fight for us. You're fighting for your brothers. You don't want to die for your country. You want to let the other bastard die for his. That's an exact quote. Sorry for the French. Actually, I don't think that's funny. But anyhow. He says, the last thing I want to tell you is this. Your enemies are going to die in black and white. Except for that first one. That first one will be with you every moment, every hour of every day, the rest of your life. You'll see him in the back seat when you look in the rearview mirror. He'll be sitting next to a cup of coffee when you wake up in the morning. He'll be standing in front of the TV every time you try to change the channel. In that first second, after you've looked down the barrel of your weapon, focused on another human being, and pulled the trigger, your life will end. And you'll never be the same. We all watch the movies. Guy running through the streets. Bang! Guy falls. He keeps going. No. That's not how it happens. When your body pulls that trigger and ends another human's life, there is a physical effect on your body. I got a friend of mine, Navy SEAL, lovely guy, sniper. He taught a class for us in Branson one time, and he says, you know, people ask me, what did I feel when I was over there pulling the trigger? My response is the recoil. And he's right, because his muscle memory, from all of the training he went through, his muscle memory was, pull it back, push it forward, breathe in, breathe out, relax, feel your heartbeat, trigger, see the red mist, choose another target. That was his muscle memory. So by the time he got there, he had done it so many times through training, he felt the recoil. So for him, it wasn't until after he got out of that mission, he got back to base camp, that he could sit down and his mind could start processing what his body had actually done that day, that he started to feel the effects. So, come on guys, who here has been through millions of dollars worth of training, giving us that muscle memory? So guess what's going to happen when that guy comes at you with the knife and you pull the trigger? You're going to let everybody else know that somebody over here's got a gun, they got a weapon. We need that weapon. They're protecting something. We need what they're protecting because we have none. So you're going to draw the attention to everybody that hears that shot, number one. Number two, you're going to be on your hands and knees, puking your guts out. Because your body is not going to be willing to accept what your mind just forced it to do. So you have to come up with some other alternative. Here's why. Jesse here asked me a question during the break. From your statistics, what percentage is children? What percentage is women? What percentage is men? You're 14? 13? 13. Great question from a 13-year-old. Very impressive. So here's the answer. I'm not a chauvinist. If I was, my wife would have beat it out of me years ago. We were married 25 years this summer. So when I say this, don't think, y'all, that, you know what, I don't care, I had the politically correct filter removed anyway. If you get offended, there's the door. Y'all can leave, I don't care. The point is, statistically, husband, wife, 2 children under the age of 14. When the father dies, the wife's odds of survival for the first 2 weeks drop from 85% to around the 60% mark. The children's odds of survival for 2 weeks drops from about 65 to 70% down to under 20%. Once the father is dead and the mother dies, the odds of those 2 children surviving 48 hours is less than 2%. Right? So, ladies, we all like to think that when it comes to a life and death situation where my husband has to choose between me and him, he'll sacrifice himself. And today I would. Today I would. My wife, who has the same blood type as I have, laying in a hospital, the doctor comes in and says, if I don't have a heart for her in 10 minutes, there's no sense in even doing anything. She's not going to make it. She's now on the donor list. There's nobody dead in our hospital, so there's no way we're going to get a heart for her in the next 10 minutes. Maybe she's bigger. I, Robert D. Gaskin, a sound mind and body, to hereby bequeath to my wife my heart. That's how much I love my wife. And my daughter. So today, while the world is whole, if it's a decision between her and I surviving, she'll survive every time. Under a society Indian event, I have daughters and grandchildren we have to consider. She has daughters and grandchildren she has to consider. She knows that our youngest daughter's best chance of survival is while I'm still alive and she's in my protection. She has a better chance of surviving with me than she does with her. In a society Indian event situation, if it comes to choosing which one of us has to die and which one has to survive, she'll choose me surviving every time. And so will I. Not because of preservation of myself over my wife, but because of preservation of our daughter over one of us. You follow that train of thought? Thank you. We're running a little bit late. Appreciate it. That's okay. We'll lead into our lunch hour. So, here's where I'm going at with that, guys. We all like to think that when that idiot neighbor shows up at our house, he's not going to get what we have. We all like to think that that irritating best friend of our wives that we never liked shows up to our house, we're not going to let him in, which, by the way, my wife's best friend happens to be a good friend of mine, and I was more than willing to take her in, and we prepped for their family and would go get their daughters if we needed to, because their daughters grew up with our daughters. We're all best friends, and let's face it, my life in a society in an event in our cabin will be much easier if she's got her best friend than if she doesn't. Right? The point I'm getting at is we need to change the way we think. You cannot be a founding father of a future society or mother if your mindset is take care of me first, take care of mine first. You know they're coming, so you can't exactly turn them away. And you know that they're not prepping because they think you're a fanatic, and so we're all preppers, so they're not going to be like you. So we hear people say things like, well, OPSEC says. I have yet to meet a prepper that wasn't in the military that understands the full idea and theory behind the term OPSEC, which is operational security. To them it means I don't tell anybody because then they'll come and take my stuff. So when their little 7-year-old son's burying their 5-year-old daughter in the front yard because you didn't tell them because you were afraid they were going to come take your stuff, guess who's responsible for those deaths? Whether you're willing to accept it now or not, you will then, and so will your wife. When it comes to society and events and the survival afterwards, there's a series of questions you need to ask yourself before you take every action. Question number 1, if I do not take this form of action, if I do not commit this deed, will any member of my family die as the result? If the answer to that question is yes, it's a no-brainer. Forget the rest of the questions. Commit the deed. You got to protect your family. But if the answer is no, then you ask yourself the next question. If I commit this act, how is my spouse going to judge me afterward? If the answer is not negative, then you ask yourself the next question. If I commit this act, how will my children judge me afterward? And if it's still a positive response, then you ask yourself the final question. If I commit this act, how will history judge me? This is how you determine what actions you take in the aftermath of a society and an event. Unfortunately, what we're going to learn later with facial expressions is this. Stand up for a second. If he is coming to me to take my stuff and do me bodily harm, he's already made the decision to commit that violent act. So when he approaches me, and he doesn't have the right facial expressions right now, get anger, you're set, your intent, you're gonna, oh, perfect. Look at here, guys. Hold that, look over here. See this muscle right here? This muscle that was flat a second ago is formed like a reverse L, and it's throbbing. He's actually thinking right now, I'm gonna hurt this man. Which is cool, because that's what I wanted, right? How do I know this? Because every human, every animal on the face of the earth, over their left eye, the muscles do the exact same thing when they make the decision to hurt somebody or something. We're all the same. So he's already made the decision that he's going to hurt me. He's got a 2.8 second lead on me. I'm sorry, 2.1 second lead on me. Now it's going to take him 0.7 seconds to perform the act, pull the trigger. My gun's in my holster. I'm done. This is where they form the L over my head as loser. So the problem is, guys, is when we're in a life or death situation, which in the aftermath of a society-ending event will be every moment of every minute of every hour of every day that you are still alive. You can die going to get the water. You can die going to use the bathroom. You can die opening a can of beans. At any moment you could die. It's a life or death situation. And at any moment you don't have 2.8 seconds to waste. And believe me, it's going to take you a lot more than 2.8 seconds to ask yourself those 4 very important questions, isn't it? So your job to survive then is to understand now how you're going to answer those questions. That's what the Morals of Survival is all about. Understanding now what you're going to do then. So you develop the muscle memory now so that when that opportunity comes, you act. Stand up for a second. When I see that muscle form over his left eye, I know he's just made the decision to perform some form of violent act on me. If my wife isn't around, and my kids aren't around, I can diffuse that situation. I can diffuse any situation. I can convince Satan to buy fire and matches from me. Can't. I can talk anybody into anything. So I can diffuse that situation. But this lovely lady standing right here, and I'm right here, and I see that, my gun's coming out and I'm pulling the trigger. I've already made that decision. Now I'm on equal level ground with anybody that would do me harm to protect her. See what I'm saying? Y'all go ahead. Wait. Sit down. Thank you. So that's what it's all about, guys. I mean, we can run through scenario after scenario after scenario. We can talk about what you're going to do when your neighbor left 2 days before the society event to go on vacation. He's on a cruise ship in the middle of the Caribbean, and he's the only other prepper in your neighborhood. And the looters came and took all your stuff because you were stupid. And he's got all his stuff across the street, ready to go, loaded in the bug-out vehicle. And you know where the keys are. And it's daytime, so the looters are sleeping off. They're partying from the night before, and you've got an opportunity to get your family out of there. And the only way you can leave is to steal his stuff. What do you do? And then he comes back. And your only ally when the world was whole that helped you to get where you were, you took his stuff and left him out in the cold. But what if he doesn't come back? But what if he does? For the looters to find. The point of the story, guys, is we can sit here and we can go through scenario after scenario after scenario. And what you will then do is you will leave here and you will answer the questions that were created in my head for the scenarios that I could come up with, so that you know how you would respond to those situations in the aftermath of a society-ending event. But you're in a different geographical area. I'll flat out tell you, when a society-ending event hits, if I'm on this side of the mountains, I'm getting out of here as soon as possible. Y'all live in the highest death zone in the world for global society-ending events.
Why?
That's good to know.
We'll get to that later. The point I'm getting at, guys, is you need to start thinking about these things now. If you're bugging out as opposed to bugging in, you get home tonight, walk out into your front yard and just stand there and look around. And ask yourself, what is my neighborhood going to look like with dead people everywhere? How am I going to react when that neighbor comes to take my stuff? How am I going to get out of here and get to my bug out location? At what point in time will I stop trying to defuse the situation and resort to violence? If I recognize that at some point in time in a society, in an event, I may have to defend myself, how do I develop that muscle memory now that will not allow me to perform the act, but will allow me to function after the act so that I can still protect my family? Because if I draw attention to me, and when the other people get there, I'm on my hands and knees puking, guess what? All the stuff I just tried to take, they're going to take. We had a young couple looking to join in our group. It was Adam, the third Marine that married a blonde, former machine gunner, the newest returnee from the wars. Love the guy, I do. He's like my little brother. You know, I mean, the day I met him, I just had an immediate respect. But we're having a group meeting, and he was a potential new join to our group, and it was kind of like their interview weekend. You know, we rent a bunch of cabins at State Park, and we bring a bunch of people in who haven't officially become members of our group yet, and they meet other people, and we have this big weekend hoo-ha, and then they leave, and then all of our people go, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. So anyhow, he's sitting there, and I asked him that scenario. And when I came to the point of, all right, so it resulted in violence, what do you do next? He says, pull up my iPad and try to save his life. Yeah. Wait a minute. So you're in a situation, you're in a world without rule of law, you've just had to defend your family from an aggressor, and you've shot him, and now you're going to try to save his life? And he says, well, it was at that close, I am a Marine. There's not going to be much left to save, but I would give it my best shot. Highly impressed at this point. Hundreds, thousands of people I've run that scenario through with anyhow, the only one that ever had an answer for what next. Try to save his life. All right, he dies. Now what? I give his wife and kid all of my food and water and go on. Wait. So a man, a woman, and a child approach you, ask you for food and water, and you tell them no. The guy becomes violent, attacks you, you put him down. Now you're going to give his wife and kid the very things he was asking for 20 minutes earlier? Yes. Why? Why would you do that? He says, because I can get more. I am a Marine. I know what to do. I can get more. But I just took. It was his fault. He made me do it. But I just took from that woman and that child their means of getting more. Not my fault, but I had to do it, and I did it, so I give him my food and water, I can get more. I looked at the kid and I said, I don't care what the rest of the people vote. Not only are you in our group, you're my personal bodyguard. Because I'm the good, right? The point of it is this. We have to look at the situations that we could possibly end up in, not the ones Bob creates in his crazy apocalyptic fantastical mind. Right? We have to look at the situations that we could encounter and determine now what we're going to do about it then. Because 2.1 seconds, that's all it takes, guys. That moment where you hesitate to run through those four questions that could be the determining factor of whether you're still alive 6 months from now, your family's still alive 6 months from now. If you are you a dredge on society? Are you a looter? Are you worthless? Or are you the leader of a society that's rising up out of the ashes? Will your name someday be on the local high school? You got to ask those questions now so that you know what you're going to do then. Because it's not your life that depends on it, or your spouse, or your children, or your grandchildren. It's your unborn great-great-great-grandchildren whose lives depend on you knowing now what you're going to do then. That's what it all boils down to. Y'all, we kind of ran over a little bit. Yes.
just have something to say. One of the things, and I'm gonna need you to stay up here. Okay. One of the things that women kind of fail to think about is, protecting their husband. Well, a man's gonna have to sleep sometime. So if you're in a situation where, he has to sleep or he's injured, then you've got to take over, or you've got to protect him. You have to have his back. So I'm going to use this as an example of.
Tell them the story,
Yes,
right?
the story. That's
This is being recorded.
It's embarrassing for me, not you. Okay, so we had an intruder come onto our property when it was raining, and we used to live on an old farm. It was raining and dark out, and Bob was out taking the dogs, and he always takes some form of weapon with her because we have coyotes and whatnot out there. We never usually worry about an intruder. But in this night, he's outside, and I hear him start yelling for me to get my gun. And I'm like, well, that's not good. So, I grabbed my pistol, and he had mounted a.
I had mine.
You had your AR, but he had mounted a flashlight onto my pistol, which was a very good idea.
With the green laser.
With a green laser on it. And I went running outside, and he's standing in the middle of the driveway, and he's locked into that muscle memory mode, that
The go mode.
military law enforcement mode. So there's no really speaking to him at this point, because he's concentrating and locked into protection mode, and he's standing there facing our pasture with his lights on, yelling for somebody to, announce themselves so he doesn't shoot. So I come running out, and all I hear him say is, "Cover my six, cover my six." I had no idea what cover my six was. I had no idea. So I can't stop and go, what does that mean? Because he's locked and he's loaded. I can't just go, I can't pull up my phone and go, what does cover my six mean? So he's locked, so I think, well, I gotta handle this myself. Cover my six. He must mean 6 o'clock. He didn't say 3:15, he said 6 o'clock. So I do this.
I look over, there's a barrel right here. Right next to my ear.
And when it was all said and done, and I told the dispatcher on the phone that I was not gonna put my weapon down, so I'm sure I'm flagged by the sheriff's department. But, it made us realize.
Hold on, she's on the phone with 911. And they're trying
And
to
they're on the
convince
phone with
us
they're on the
to
phone
go
with the
inside and put our guns away.
Yeah.
While there's an armed intruder on our property. When I first saw him, I saw the weapon in his hand. Okay? So she's on the phone with 911. They're trying to convince her to go in the house, put the guns away, and I'm hollering, you ready for this? Come out with your hands up, announce yourself, and I will not shoot. If I see you when you're not surrendering, I will kill you. That's what 911 is here.
And they're on the phone with the sheriff's department, with the guys that are gonna
So
respond.
the deputies are hearing that as they're driving down my street.
I said, I'll put it on safety, but I'm not putting my gun away, So show them what cover my six actually means. I'll be.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just real simple. Like, we're gonna get into all this later, but so if I'm covering her, okay, she's got her back to this area. She's got, as a woman, she has a 180-degree field of fire that is a blind spot to her. I say that because as a man, we have about a 70-degree field of vision.
This is scientific, by the way.
Most men don't know this, and we're going to talk about that later. So, if I'm covering somebody six, obviously what I'm doing is I'm covering the part that they can't see.
Not facing that
Okay,
way.
when you talk about clocks, you're not always at 12 o'clock. The two people are the center, where the two arms come together in the center of the clock, right? So if I'm watching her 3 o'clock, her 6 o'clock, her 9 o'clock, right? Because she's watching 12 o'clock. Okay. The point of what she's saying.
My point of what I'm saying is, women, children, getting in their teen years, almost adults, obviously you need weapons training. It's no muscle memory for me to load an AR. I'm like fumbling with ammo, and my thumbs aren't strong enough to push the ammo down into the magazine and stuff like that. If you're at home sitting on the floor, grab some ammo. Start learning how to load that mag, because you may be feeding him in a firefight,
Or I
feeding
may
him those
be dead.
magazines. You remember the old westerns where the women would have to load the rifles for the guys and they'd be shooting out the window? It's gonna be the same thing, but you need to learn how to use that weapon. You need to learn how to make it a muscle memory on loading and unloading and safety. But the bigger thing is, you need to know tactical stuff. You're gonna have to protect him at some point, or if you're a single mom or something and you have kids. Everybody thinks and hopes that their protector is gonna survive, but if they don't, what are you gonna do? But he has to survive, so I may have to pull a fire watch, or we may be walking in a situation where something pops out or something, I may have to react before he does. Know your tactical training,